Hello and welcome to Teenagers Untangled, the audio hug for parents going through the teenage years. I'm Rachel Richards, journalist, parenting coach, mother of 2 teenagers and 2 bonus daughters.
Hi there, I'm Susie Asley, mindfulness coach, mindful therapist and musician, and mother of 3 teenagers, 2 of them are twins.
Now, there isn't really any logic to the way this podcast unfolds. It tends to be what I'm obsessed with at any moment in time, right? But hopefully, as a parent of teens, the topics we cover resonate with you. And because I think raising teens becomes far more than the nitty-gritty of child rearing, isn't it? It's about society. It's about the people we want to be and the people we want our kids to be. So with that in mind, today we're exploring a theme that's deeply rooted in human existence, community. And I've been rattling on about it for a while, haven't I?
You have, yes.
Yes, sort of realising that that's something that's missing. But then the question is, do we want a village?
Yeah, and how?
Yeah, how do we want a village? And people always say, it takes a village to raise a child. Does it? Does it though?
Well, the point is that it takes more than the nuclear family, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. And I think one of the things that we've always used traditionally to plug into a community was having children, wasn't it? Because it would raise the number of touch points with people in the surroundings. And so, I've got friends who are in a gay marriage and they moved to the countryside, much harder for them to integrate because how do you meet people?
Yes.
You have to go and chat to them in the village shop and...
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I moved with 3 children and easy access to people.
Suddenly plugged in, yes.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a friend recently about creating groups who could discuss topics and support each other, a bit like a book club, but with parenting at its centre. And she curled her lip saying, I don't want to be in a group with these people. And she showed me a text message that she'd received from one of the mums, which was hard to read and she got very upset. And she just said, I just why would I want to spend time with these people? So that's the difficulty. So we'll talk about,
you have to pick what your village looks like.
Exactly. But then that's the problem because we want to pick it, don't we? Anyway, so let's start with a nugget before we carry on. Do you have a nugget?
I do. It's this idea. So when I'm working as a therapist with people in relationships, which all of us are at some point, some kinds of relationships, there's this idea of push-pull. So when we have a dynamic between 2 people, if one person is pushing, then the other one is sort of pulling away, because there has to be balance in it, and the other way around. So, for example, if as a parent, if it often happens with teenagers, I think maybe we've even talked about it before,
we have,
this idea that, if you're really on your kids because you really want contact, you really want connect, and the kid's like, whoa, give me some space. That's a push-pull thing. Yeah. And I just noticed that I was falling into that a little bit. And it's really easy to do when stuff comes up and maybe we're worrying about particular things and we get into a sort of a mindset of, I need to be on this. I need to be on this. And suddenly it gets a little bit out of balance. So I noticed I was doing the pushing and not maybe receiving the connection that I thought I deserved. Yes. Or no, actually more to the point, I was wearing myself out. It was more like that way around, actually. And I noticed it and I stopped and I kind of centered myself a bit more and found out, okay, where am I in this? I'm not at the whim of everybody else. Where am I? And it just brought more balance in immediately. Yeah. You ripple out something completely different, and then the balance is restored.
Yes,
it's quite powerful.
I love that, and I think it's really common when our kids go through that transition stage when they've got into puberty and they start pulling away because they're exploring elsewhere, and we panic and think, what's happened to my relationship?
Yeah.
We move in, and they pull away more because they feel the oppression.
Yeah.
And it's just
Absolutely.
being able to cope with our own emotions.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it wasn't so much that. It was more sort of trying to sort out particular things and worrying about things that were coming up and worrying too much and trying to fix in advance. I was kind of pushing there and I got told to back off.
and that's because you've got a good relationship.
Yeah.
So they know now that it's okay to say that.
Yeah, totally. And I went, oh God, you're right. Okay, I'll back off. Sorry.
My nugget is about, I interviewed the lady from Grit, I think her name's Louise, who used this amazing acronym, which is HALT, HALT. And it's, you don't say anything if you're hungry, angry, late or tired.
I remember that. It's brilliant.
Love it. And I had an instance recently where I was almost all of those things. And I got in the car with my daughter, having seen that rather than just quickly fold her clothes, she literally balled them up and stuffed them in a bag. And it just upset me for all sorts of reasons. There was lots of other stuff going on in our relationship. And I tried not to say anything. And eventually I did. And then I called her lazy. And then we just sat in silence as I was driving. Luckily, it was a long enough car drive. And where eventually I said, actually, I'm really sorry. I don't think of you that way, because actually I can see in these ways you're not lazy at all.
Yeah.
And we had an amazing conversation off the back of it. And I realised, because then I said, so when you did that, what were you thinking? And if you just hear what were you thinking, it would sound offensive. But actually I said, so when that happened, what were you thinking? She said, I was just thinking it's easy. And I said, so, but is it easy? Is it easier to do it that way rather than take the extra few seconds just to fold them nicely so that when you put them on, they're not crumpled? And she said, well, my friends don't care if my clothes are crumpled. Yeah. And it opened up an entire avenue of conversation, which then made me understand something that's also an addendum to this, which is I don't actually think that natural consequences are effective and kind and work with some children. And that's because some kids do not pick up on signals from people around them. They don't learn that way. And when they do, it's painful. And I do think that some kids need things to be explained explicitly, because it had never occurred to her that if she walked around in highly crumpled clothes that were dirty, other people might make decisions about her that were unkind and she didn't know.
Interesting. That's interesting. I think sometimes if we have an agenda in there, so for her the natural consequence wasn't a thing, but maybe it was without her knowing. Maybe that's. But
my point is, for example, it's like manners. If you don't explain to your kids that this is how things work, you can rely on natural consequences for them to learn.
Yes.
Or you could say, this is the way people might view you.
Yes.
And, if they don't then care, well, that's a different thing. But actually being able to be explicit about things that might impact them without them even knowing, because people won't tell them.
No, and social constructs, maybe that needs more, doesn't it? Natural consequences work if you're late and you miss the bus.
Yes.
And then you're not late the next time, hopefully, although that doesn't always work.
Doesn't always work. No, but that's also, but so David Jaeger talked about it in 10 to 25, where it should be high expectations and high support. So if they're struggling to meet those expectations, don't think they're lazy. Just think, oh, okay, they need a bit more support, understanding how to put these things in place. As long as they understand that it matters. And if they think it doesn't matter, then that's a different discussion, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Anyway, you have a quick review there,
I do. It's a very short one from YouTube, which is very cool. Your topics are always relevant and or relatable. I'm so grateful for your podcast. Thank you so much.
Yes, and I'm sorry, YouTube watchers, because there's nothing to watch mostly on there. I put up the odd video, but it's mostly just our podcast linked to YouTube. So eventually one day. Anyway, back to community. Now, traditionally, it's been defined as a group of people living in the same place or having a common characteristic. And I'm not going to try and distinguish between village and community. Let's just talk about the whole thing. But I think it's more than that, isn't it? It's kind of connection, shared purpose, mutual support. Yeah. When you think about it in your head.
Yes, support, the mutual support. I remember coming to this country and I had 3 children, single mother, been through a horrible divorce, and I had my parents living in the same town, which is why we moved back here. So therefore, village. But the idea that I had what were they 2 3-year-old twins and a 6-year-old, and doing
so
everything on my own. So it's for me, it's also the responsibility. It's I just need to go and buy a bottle of flipping milk, and we all have to bundle into the car.
Yep.
Can the neighbour, can we share dinners, can we do things? That's the village element. Whereas in our very romanticized view of what life used to look like, which I'm sure wasn't the case at all, but there are some elements that I'm sure were you just they'd be running in the street and you just help each other out. That's gone.
Well, I read one thing where this woman had said, if you're wondering how your grandma managed to have 9 kids and they weren't falling apart when you've only got say 2, she said, just remember, your grandma never had to strap the kids into the car in car seats because we didn't have those. We didn't have seatbelts. She probably had other people around who would just watch the kids. People weren't judging them in that way.
No, it's
right?
the people. Hold my baby. I'm just going to do this. Yes. Oh, okay.
Yes.
But now we can't. I'm busy. I've got to go to a meeting. I can't do that. No, you'll have to book me in. I can hold your baby at 11:45, maybe 11:50, but only for 10 minutes. It's completely different.
Yeah.
When we were thinking of moving or trying to move from Denmark, actually, I looked at alternatives because I wasn't sure whether that was going to happen. And there are places where you can live in community, and I looked at them for that very reason, because you're helping each other out. You're, taking it in turns to cook dinner, but you still have your own independent space. So it's not like you're in a sort of a communal space all the time. But for that very reason, the responsibility and the freedom to just kind of be with other people on a spontaneous basis. Because
it can be very lonely.
It's very lonely, and it's a lot to do on your own.
Yeah, I agree. And when you talk about social identity, and we've come together for protection and support, identity and belonging, and it's critical for our survival. You watch teenagers trying to form groups, and it's a survival thing as well as an identity thing. Yeah. And what's interesting when you look at social identity sort of theories, being in an in-group can enhance feelings of pride, self-esteem and belongingness. But once you categorize yourself in a group, then you start to identify what the other groups are. And we need to think of ourselves as good, if not better, than the other groups in order to feel good about ourselves.
Because we're still tribal.
Right? And we see this in the playground all the time. So, when you create a group, you're almost creating a wall that says, right, this is what this is, and it defines it. And then outside that is different. Yes, whereas contrast. A village or community is different because it's a kind of muddle of people who have a reason to be together. Maybe you do have shared values, but it's not as tightly held, is it?
It's more sort of social responsibility rather than location based, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let's explore it. So there was a great tweet by Cartoons Hate Her, which looked into this detail, and I loved it. So, you can read it on her, I think it's a Substack, but she points out that people who bemoan the loss of a village don't actually want one, because it would require them to interact with other people. And by other people, she maintains those are the people outside what we've just outlined, right? Because you can't. So let's say you're in a village. It requires you to accept other people. And those people might be your aunt who voted for Trump, or the mother-in-law who calls your 2-year-old son a ladies' man, or your father-in-law who has the TV on all the time, or your aunt who speaks in fluent tabloid journalism. Right? These people, when you actually meet the different people in your community or your village, you may really not like their viewpoints.
Yeah, absolutely. And therefore, then it's a great lesson in tolerance, isn't it? But we're not used to having to wade through that. We just would rather go, I can't be bothered. And it also requires that we commit and we take part and we do it. And we're all so busy and we're all very important.
100%.
And we are busier.
I'm busier than everybody else.
Yes. And my time is way more valuable. So I used to, and it was real. Because I think basically what we want, or maybe I'm just speaking for myself anyway, but we want help, don't we? We want to share the responsibility. We want some connection that will be supportive and helpful to us, and that's really beautiful. But we want to do it between the hours
in our time,
2 to 4 on a Saturday afternoon, because in the morning. So somebody's got football and I can't do it then, and that. So our time is much more limited. We're much less spontaneous. So it really has to fit our agenda.
Yes.
And then we sort of decide that, well, actually, maybe it's not worth my time, because if I've got less time, then maybe I just need to do nothing in that space. And if I've got to also cook or offer my services in some way, I don't think I can be bothered.
Yeah.
I put my hand up completely for that in a slightly embarrassed way.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, but this is very much the and when I've looked at research into the way society has evolved, we are the most individualistic society that's ever existed. And it's this desire to have a life that's shaped the way we want to shape it, but also we actually want free childcare. Would you mind looking, or I can help. Yes, we want connection.
Yeah, we long for connection. Yes. We need it. We're social beings. We love it. But can we do it tomorrow? Because today I'm busy.
Yes.
And also the idea that, and I think I used to hide behind, single mother of 3 small children, and it was valid, and I have self-compassion for that, maybe somebody with 2 parents and 1 child or 2 children could bring the brownies or do the extra bit, because actually I had more than enough to be doing on my own. Yeah. And that was real. But I think I also used it sometimes as I don't have to do that, because that's a bit of a pain. I just want the village. I really want the village, but I don't always want to put the
and to make me feel
in.
welcome and loved when I need it.
Yeah,
but only when I need it.
But it's reciprocity. Yes. It has to be reciprocity, so it ends up with the people who love organising and maybe slightly controlling or not, but they just have bigger heart than I do. Maybe they do more than their fair share.
Yes, and I've witnessed good community operations. So a friend of mine is amazing at this, and she checks in on all the people around her. And when I came to this area, I found that people were running play groups where it took one person to set the whole thing up, but the way they set it up meant that there were always mums who would turn up and say, okay, my kid's out there playing, but I'm in the kitchen doing this work. And other mums would watch the kid playing so that could happen. But I think it takes thought organisation and someone behind the scenes who's prepared to do the extra.
Yes.
And that's the difficulty.
Get the ball rolling,
yes,
and then keep
and everyone's
it going.
looking at everyone else going, so who's it going to be? Who's
we really want this. We really we desperately want it. We need it. But can someone else do it?
Yeah. And actually, one of the reasons I jumped at setting up this podcast was because before that, I kept thinking I need to give back. I need to help the community, and I'd started working in a toddler group, helping them, and I would cook for them, and I would turn up, and while I was there I'd open up and get all the stuff out and then put it away, and I just thought, I am dying of boredom here. I actually don't care.
Okay.
And I've realised that's just not my wheelhouse. And actually, I suppose in a way, one of the things that we could be doing more of is saying, what can I contribute? How can I look for lots of things that might suit me? In the same way that in a house, when we're in a team, I don't say to my kids, you've got to do this, this and this. I say, here are the things that need to be done. Which ones are you going to do?
Yeah.
But again, it takes somebody who will end up saying, this needs to be done.
Yes.
And there's a feminist who operates on Threads. I forget her name. I'd love to have her on the programme. But she talks about teaching people to notice. We need to notice that things need to be done. So we need to be conscious that there needs to be a community for us to actually want to make it work.
Yeah, and it's inspiring, isn't it? If somebody, we have an amazing WhatsApp neighbour group. It kind of came into being really during COVID. It existed, but it was more like, I've got a letter delivered to the wrong address kind of group. Whereas in COVID, it became very supportive and was really helpful, and it still exists. And so we had a random power cut the other night, and it. First of all, we were being told it would be out all evening until the early hours of the morning. And then people were putting on the WhatsApp, we need to check in on, the elderly people on the road. Is everyone okay?
Yes.
And not all of them are on WhatsApp.
Yeah, who's going to do it?
Yeah, people were going, I'll go and see number 19. Nice. I'll go and do that. Yes. And it was really beautiful, but it's really inspiring, because you think, that then just becomes a norm. So next time it will be a norm to do that.
And I think that's how we can do some of this. So I've learnt to, when I walk around, I'm trying to raise the amount of touch points I have by just talking to anybody. Yeah. And actually I've read that when you're polite and lovely to people, that actually makes you feel better.
Yes.
So why not?
Absolutely.
No downside to that. The only problem is the person who will then chew your ear off, and you're thinking, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, we can be boundaried in it too.
Yes.
And maybe, run away.
Pretend you have an appointment.
Yeah.
And I think also an interesting thing that's happened is this element of exclusive ownership over our children. And we have an idea, because society's changed rapidly. So what our parents considered to be acceptable parenting is very different from what is now the case.
Point.
And so there's this element of, I can't hand my child over because, what if they parent wrong?
Yeah, or we feel really guilty for it. Do you mind? Do you mind? Is it okay? I will only be 20 minutes. Are you sure? Yeah. Thank you so much. Buy them a bottle of wine. And whereas in the old days, we're like, my kid's over at yours. I'll see you in an hour.
Yes.
Or not even say it.
Yeah. But it would be reciprocated, because I have had people say, I get really upset because this kid's around my house every night, night after night after night. The parents have never contacted me and said, do you want me to host? Do you want? And I've said, well, maybe they feel like you're just such a good host that they feel awkward about offering. But if you'd like them to offer, maybe have a conversation with them, and they may not realise.
No.
Because a lot of people, I think it's just they don't even notice these things.
No.
They don't realise. And I also think it's made it harder now with social media and online world. And the reason I say that is because if you will have ideas in your own family and your own house about what's acceptable in terms of accessing online, they go to someone else's house and they might be playing Grand Theft Auto at 13.
Yeah, that's true.
It's made it much harder, don't you think? Because parents are much more like, well, okay, you go round to their house and you sort of have to accept their rules. But those are really quite big.
Yeah, no, that's
issues.
really true. When the kids are a bit younger, early teens, that's hard to manage because they're not just playing football in the field anymore.
No, it's different.
No, that's
right?
true. I hadn't thought of that.
And I think what's really interesting is I ran an experiment where, the nugget I've just mentioned about my daughter and just stupidly me saying, oh, you're late, lashing out because I was tired, all those things halt. And then apologising. And I decided to make a kind of a story about it. And I posted it on 2 platforms, reaching out to people to try and create more of a sort of like talk about these things. One was Threads, which is a newer platform that's supposed to be really nice, and one was Mumsnet. Okay. And I've seen people be really harsh and judgmental on Mumsnet. So I kind of expected on Mumsnet people would be really horrible to me, and then on the Threads they'd be really friendly. And what was really interesting was on Mumsnet, they were super lovely. They read the entire thing and they made some lovely comments, and then they were vulnerable. And you sort of thought, gosh, we've got a thing going here. It's really lovely. Nice. Because really what we're trying to say is that the whole point was we can apologise, and that's the most important part of this, because we're human and these things happen, and that my kids benefit from seeing me make mistakes. Because, right? Yeah. On Threads, very different.
Oh, really?
And what happened was really unpleasant, because I had the majority of people making snap judgments, like literally just ridiculous, let it go. Why would you say anything like that? This was stupid, and all sorts of things.
Wasting their time kind of thing.
No, just I'm a bad parent for lashing out, and I shouldn't be worried about that, and it's not a problem, and why did I even think that was something to talk about? Which, fair enough, but what had happened was they clearly hadn't read the whole thing. They just went, oh, I've got the answer. And it made me realise what it feels like as a teenager when we think we've listened, but we haven't listened. And then we just snap, we go, well, obviously it's this.
Yeah.
And you think, wait, you didn't actually read any of that.
No,
you just read the first couple of lines and went, oh, well, I know the answer.
Yeah.
And then I had some parents saying, well, you need therapy.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And, well, you can imagine what I said. And I just said, actually, no, I think you've missed the point of the thread. It's actually that we can make these mistakes because we're humans, and then we can solve it by being honest with our kids and apologising. Yeah. And she brought out the, with all due respect, to her response, which always means that they don't have any respect for you at all. But... Yes, exactly. And I just thought, gosh, that's really interesting that this person felt that they definitely had to judge me, and they definitely had to make a decision about. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's really interesting. I think a huge number of parents, and I really mean that, do not try and reach out or talk to people because of the fear of judgment and this behaviour.
Yeah, we're the most insecure generation parenting. Yes. We have so much information and so many opinions and so much that is helpful, but we're so, like, I'm massively generalising here, but we're so insecure. We worry that and because it's like we've talked about before, it's such a big deal for us, not all of us, but, for a lot of us, parenting, are we doing it right? Am I good enough? Am I doing this right? Am I going to ruin their whole lives? So there's way more at stake. It's scary.
And I just think people need to step away from the perfection stick.
Yeah.
You don't, this is the sort of, either you've got to have an answer, because we do this with our kids, got to have an answer, or you're broken.
Yes.
But no, you're just a human being. This stuff happens. It's fine.
Let's look at it on the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also what's interesting about the whole village thing is we've touched on this, is the kind of, I was in a village as a teenager. It was deeply unpleasant.
Okay.
Very small number of people in the community. Yes. Lots of, we didn't reach out for lots of reasons. so I didn't have a connection with people, but there was a lot of talk, and it took they held back on people being part of the community for a very long time because you weren't quite right for...
You didn't fit in.
Yes, lots of that sort of... and I remember as a teenager sort of dropping to my hands and knees and crawling under the window if someone came to the door because I just felt so
that's not good.
anxious about it. Yes, and I think what people... I read a really fantastic thing where there was a thread about community and people missing community. And this person wrote, I take a risk and presume none of the parents who bemoan the loss of a village ever lived in an actual real village. My parents' entire families moved from villages into the big city when their country industrialised. Not once did I, in my childhood, ever hear them speak sentimentally about village life.
That's interesting.
Yes.
But then statistically, we're more lonely in a big city where there are more people, aren't we?
Yes. Yes. And he points out, they were stuck with the monotony of the same people, the random people, the crazy, the evil, the silly, the stupid. You sort of end up
like
having to accept like the Archers. That's a radio program that's very popular. It's the longest running soap opera in England. Yeah. So, and then there's that community policing. There's judgment, the next door.
It can be, yeah. It can be beautiful. It depends on the village, doesn't it? It depends on how you are in the village.
It takes one bad actor.
Yeah, but you can also, you
need
change.
to push back.
Yeah, we can be how we want to be wherever we are, but it can be more challenging in some places.
And one other thing that I thought about is I think one of the things about loss of community, well, there are two. One is the reduction particularly in the UK, in religion. And religious houses used to provide the community, and there would be a leader who would say, this is how we're going to behave amongst each other. This is what's expected. Yeah. Not that people necessarily liked it, and I used to go to the Methodist church. I've been to Pentecostal church. I've been to Catholic church. I've been to lots of churches because I was always interested.
Yeah, social events are also come through the religious thing.
And this is where you have a leader whose job it is to organise people and create events, and they have people sort of like the minions who also organise things, and it's all under a good cause. And I think there's some really wonderful things about that.
And traditionally looking out for the needy in that village, which is really beautiful. That nobody gets falls through the net.
Yes, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about Christianity that somehow hasn't bled through to some of the things we do. Because I always thought you don't need Christianity to be Christian behaving, but then...
Maybe we need the structure.
We need the structure and we need the values that we hand on. We need to be able to explain, these are our values and this is what's important. Yeah. But the other thing that I thought is the people who tend to create community are women. And I don't want to be sexist about this because there are men who create some communal things, but an awful lot of what gets done, so even Christmas, Easter celebrations, most of it's done by women. Yeah. And when women step away from that for various reasons, a lot of it just sort of dissipates. And I'm just interested in that. And I'd love to know what people think. To what extent is that the case?
It would be interesting to hear.
Do you have men in your community who stepped in, who are making communal things happen? Because I know there will be.
Yeah, there are.
How much of that is happening, and how much of it has been that women have gone, I'm busy.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Interesting. Yeah. I'm thinking of things that I know. I think some of them, the more commercial ones, maybe that's more mixed. But if it's just if it's no money, communal, there's no
there's no money involved. Yeah, it's just about doing things for other people.
Yeah, or doing it. It's often a win-win, isn't it? We're doing it for ourselves as well, and it's a beautiful thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Isn't that interesting? I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff in the pot.
Let us know what's it like where you are.
Please let us know. And I do think that one of the other things people have talked a lot about is how infrastructure that supports these communities and the villages has fallen away through government lack of funding and people not staring at it and going, we need this. So we've had a reduction in youth centres across the whole of the UK, and that's one of the key times when people need community. But just generally, there mostly it's the sort of church halls that are available. There are communal halls, village halls, which can be hired. But I just wonder how much...
Yeah, community's changed, hasn't it? So lots of people go to the gym. They would say that's their community.
Very good point, yes.
Things always change. There's some things stop, so other things begin.
Yeah.
But it's, what does that look like? Yeah, I'm thinking the gym
and the online communities. You because the thing about the online community, the reason looking back at the Threads thing, was there's no community. Nobody has agreed ideas about. They don't know me. So somehow a community needs to be sort of, they kind of know how you think.
Yeah.
And then they can give you grace because they're like, oh, I know that she doesn't mean well, but ill, that she's actually trying her best.
Yeah.
And I think community is about having shared values and having an idea that people are trying to do their best.
Yeah, with a degree of flexibility and openness for difference, isn't it? Like going back to your idea of there are lots of oddballs in the village. I put my hand up to be one of them probably. Well. It's a kind of yearning. It's a thing we need. We need to connect, but how do we do it? And how do we do it in this society where we're so busy?
So busy. I'm so busy.
So important.
I mean, the fact that you even come over here is extraordinary.
You're so lucky.
I know, I'm so lucky. She spares this time to just come over and chat. We sort out our life. It's amazing. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. I'd love to hear any thoughts about this.
Also from different countries. Like, is it different in different places? That would be super interesting, actually.
Yeah. Don't just, raise your fists and go, no, but you don't understand. Tell me.
Yeah. Tell us what we don't understand.
Exactly. Right, that's it. Look, the best way you can help this podcast is by sharing it with someone else or giving us a review. Just go on to whatever platform you're on and just give us even a little short review. It's great. You don't have to write an entire essay, but essays are great as well. And give us questions, things that trouble you. Yeah. Susie is quite active on LinkedIn, aren't you? That's a really good place to find you.
Yeah, you can find all my links on my website. It's probably the easiest place to go, which is www.amindfullife.co.uk.
Yes,
and it desperately needs updating. Actually,
does it? What have you been doing with yourself?
Well,
you're building a community,
tweak
aren't you?
And I change, and then I haven't updated it, so I will.
It's these, when you're juggling so many different things, like my newsletter that hasn't been happening, or my, sort of trying to figure out how you should be working.
Yeah, and some things are easy for us, aren't they? And easy, and things like doing my website, I don't find easy. So anyone out there in the village.
Absolutely, she's interested in your thoughts about her website. Absolutely. If you can do it, don't just tell her. If you can fix it for her.
Yeah, I mean, don't go and look at it now though, because it's all out of date. But whatever. Right. Do go and look at it now.
So it's
www.amindful-life.co.uk.
And I'm www.teenagersuntangled.com, and the email address is teenagersuntangled@gmail.com. I think that's it.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye for now.